everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Jabez Experience. My name is Helen V. Hicks. I'm a licensed professional counselor, parent coach, author, podcaster, mother of five, doing it all. And this is my co-host.
My name is Curtis Brooks. I am a men's life coach specializing in transformational leadership for men.
Awesome. Thank you so much. So tonight, we are coming at you guys with a very interesting topic. And, I'm sure we'll just take off with this one, but trauma and getting to the other side. So, Curtis, I'm going to hand it off to you to kind of get us started. And, of course, I'll jump in.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, trauma is one of those things that, for me, as a young person, I dealt with it, and as many other people or millions of people may have dealt with trauma, it's one of those things where, for me, it wasn't necessarily uh, anything like a physical abuse, but it really, for me, it came from my just my mother parenting, and so for me, it was more of those expectations. And so I know this might be a little different, but it still kind of yields the same results in a lot of ways. But so for me, having to get out from under that trauma, again, I think sometimes we can place huge expectations on people and not knowing that we are. And that's such was the case for me. And I placed these huge expectations. It's just a young person didn't even know they were there, but they were. And I think even as I got into an adult, they became more prevalent. And so for me, getting to the other side of that was just it was a journey. It was a serious journey because I think for some of us growing up, we can end up having mother issues, men, women, and such was the case for me. And I think it was that's where it kind of turned out to just having mother issues and just I'm just trying to get to the other side of that. So Helen, I know that you talk with probably a ton of clients who are dealing with trauma and on all different kinds of levels. And so what's your thoughts on that?
Okay, so first of all, I agree with you. There are millions on top of millions of people who are dealing with trauma to some extent.
Mm-hmm.
And just from the mental health side of it, it's kind of interesting to see how trauma has transitioned over the years because when I first got into the field back in the 90s, trauma was like considered very specific to threat of death types of incidences. And we're talking like way back to the DSM-3. Now we're on
Right.
DSM-5R, I think. So this is years and years and years ago where it was, oh, well, people can only be traumatized if they've had some sort of near-death experience or they witnessed death or some, type of way. And you can see like the progression of it over like the last 30 years where it's very inclusive of it's not just, near-death experiences. It's sometimes it's the unexpected experiences, the things that just completely catch you off guard
Right.
and things that you thought like, oh, this was never going to be possible. I was never
Right.
supposed to be in this type of position or situation. And that is traumatizing because it's like so outside of
Mm.
what you consider normal or, like I said, the expectation. And then
Right.
there's also a sense of trauma. I think people have built up, let me change my words because I don't mean it in terms of the individual themselves have built up this fear, but more so an external pressure that's
Right.
been placed on people that has built up that fear, like you talked about, those expectations, that fear of not meeting those expectations, that
Right.
fear of, not being able to withstand the pressure, that fear of not being able to rise to whatever, people want you to do. And that can be so intense where people, you may even have flashbacks or out of body experiences and all sorts of things in terms of, oh my gosh, what if I don't meet this expectation, if this doesn't happen, if I can't do this, if I can't be this. And then their anxiety thoughts just kind of run away with them and they're fully traumatized with all these what ifs, and then you have the reality that gets mixed in there too. So there's a part of it that this person is focused on what hasn't happened and what they believe could happen, and then there's another part that's what's actually happened. it, you know and sometimes what's actually happened just intensifies what could happen. That fear of, oh my gosh, we've already gone from 0 to 500. What if?
Right, right. Yeah, I think for me it was more just the expectations, and I think at somehow, when we're younger, and as with many other people who are probably dealing with trauma, it might be the expectations, and uh, so again, such was my case, especially. I think as a young person, you have an idea of what a parent should be like. You have an idea of how, in your own mind, and again, it's obviously, like you said, doesn't mean that it's true, but you just have that idea. And so for me, just going through what I went through, and my mom is a great mother, but again, perhaps she was dealing with some things, and so I've had to kind of learn how to kind of pull back on that, because as a young person, again, when you just don't have that understanding, as a young person, we have a tendency to blame mom and dad for all of this. That mom did this, and it's like they can never do right. But then as you get older and you become a parent yourself, you finally realize that, much to what Helen was just saying, is that uh, a lot of what you assumed or what was your assumption is not true. And becoming a parent for the first time, or just in that space when you're not a parent, and oh, how could they do this to their child, all those different things, and if I was a parent I would never do that. But wait until you become a parent, and all those things just kind of fly out the window. And hell, and I know you got 5 boys, and so I know you understand for sure. But that was the case with me. Again, just having those expectations and finding that my expectations just didn't line up with the reality that actually existed. And so I had to
Right.
learn how to, at some point, be in charge of what I put out there now. Not that mom had said anything to me, but uh, the building of this wall, if you will, that eventually created a separation, that would create a separation. So I had to be in charge of putting that wall together. Also had to be in charge of disassembling the wall as well. So
Right. I totally hear where you're coming from. My head is going in like so many different directions, so you might have to pull me back on track. But in terms of things that I'm hearing you say, um, because I'm very, I guess, let me change my words again. I wanted to say I'm open, but I'm honest. That's a better perspective for me to say about it, because I don't just go around there throwing out, my life story to everyone.
right,
But,
right.
if in a situation and someone's asked or whatever, I'm honest about that situation. And so relating, and building on top of what you're already put out there in terms of parental expectations, whether it's the parent's expectations on you or your expectations on the
Mm,
parent, and a sense of trauma that can come out of all of this.
right.
I grew up with a paranoid schizophrenic mom. And
Hmm. Hmm.
like, and she was undiagnosed, untreated. You could
Mm,
not tell her that there was something wrong. Um,
right, right,
but
right.
there were all sorts of things that she did that, growing up was like, huh? Well, why do we have to do this? Why is it like that? And you have
Like
this
pull the blinds
strange,
down.
like, honestly, just to kind of give people a little bit of window into my growing up. Growing up, our house was pitch black inside. My mother covered
Oh,
all the windows. Like,
that wasn't.
seriously, she
I was just joking at
no.
you.
I know, but she covered all the windows with thick material because in her mind, people were watching her.
Mm,
She covered the TV because people
right.
were watching her through the TV. Like she did not want a satellite on the house because that was just giving whoever
Right.
better access to her. Like there's so many things that I
Mm,
experienced from my mother's untreated mental illness.
mm,
And when I listen to other people's stories, if they had experienced what I had experienced, they would have left that experience feeling traumatized. But
right.
for
Right.
me, it was normal because
Mm,
that was my whole childhood.
right.
And she definitely got worse, before she passed away.
Mm,
But for my childhood, that was normal. This is what mom does, and this is how mom treats us. Because if she felt like you were a threat, she would get aggressive. And
mm,
so, like, that was normal to us.
right. Right.
As sad, and I know I laugh at it, but as sad as it can sound to anyone who's listening,
Mm,
um, we didn't walk away thinking we had been abused.
interesting. Very interesting. Now, question, Helen, is this what kind of inspired you to get into therapy, or?
Yes. So,
Okay.
absolutely. Having the experiences with my mom, and then I went to college, and I tell this story often. Is I went to an intro to psych class, and we were reading this chapter in abnormal psych, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is my mom.
Right. Right. Right.
And so I went home and I showed my dad. I was like, Dad, read this, read this.
Mm,
And he read it and he's like, oh, that's your mom. It's like, I know.
right.
And
Right.
so for me, I pursued psychology because in that moment, it made sense of my
Mm,
life.
mm,
you know Everything fell into place, all the oddities, all the things that she
right.
said and she did and how she treated us, and like all these things like suddenly made sense. And
Mm,
so I understood different perceptions and different dynamics, that I had
right.
experienced, and I was able to label it and put names to it and work through it in my own way. But again, I'm
Mm,
flying off into a different area, but I wanted to come back to the point of there are some aspects of trauma that are very much rooted in perception.
mm,
Because
absolutely. Absolutely.
like I said, if I just describe to
Mm,
people the things that I experience, they would automatically say, wow, that was traumatic. But even when I talk about it now, I don't feel a sense of trauma. It's like, but that was normal. That was mom. That's what she did,
So, 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 okay, because you didn't feel a sense of trauma, um, and it actually possibly being something being there, and I know those two things are two different, but do you feel that you had to come down from a certain type of thinking and really just kind of do a different assessment from a different perspective now that you have additional information?
Assessment from a different perspective, yes.
Okay.
Um, be, because I just couldn't relate
Right.
to the trauma aspect
Gotcha.
of it. But what I could relate to was being able to say, oh, it makes sense that this is how I feel when I'm in relationships. And this is why I do what I do when,
Interesting.
interacting with other people. Like, this
Mhm.
is how it's affected me, even though I
Gotcha.
never labeled it as a
Right.
trauma response or anything of that nature. But it was just being able to view it as, okay, here's how the dots are connected and they're
Right.
lining up.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting because I love what you said in regards to just labeling it and be it trauma or whatever else someone might be dealing with. But I love that what you said in regards to labeling, because I think if we don't label it, whatever we may be going through, especially if working as coaches, and I know you're a therapist as well, but working in that particular space, if we don't label it and working with clients and being able to identify it, you can't fix something that you're unwilling to label. or one something that you're unwilling to call out and say, hey, this is what it is, or being able to identify it as XYZ, whatever that might be. And so that part is very interesting. And so for me, interesting enough, I think for me, another part of my trauma, this is actually kind of just coming to me right now, Helen. So this is like fresh off the press. Uh, for me, I think it was not having a father that was traumatic for me. And so that kind of really kind of got me into the space of working with men and the importance of having a father. And actually, not obviously not that I'm fathers who other these other men, but just really understanding the importance of that authority, and knowing that even for men, we have to go through a son stage. We have to, and that's important for us, is to go through a son stage. And in going through that son stage, we can evolve into becoming a mature man. And a lot of times for men, it's not that we're broken. And I actually heard someone else say this earlier. And so, uh, but yet, he was saying that it's not that we're broken, but yet underdeveloped. And I thought it was pretty interesting, because I think that for a lot of us as men, I was one of those persons that was underdeveloped, but searching earnestly to find that role model, someone who would really feed into me, and I just really desired that. And so as I got older, I got to a place where I was just bent on finding that thing, or that person that would speak to my life, because I somehow, even as a young person, I knew I was without the instructions, and I desperately wanted them. And so as I got older, it would be revealed to me and that's giving God all the glory, that I would have to go through the process of becoming the father that I was missing. And so that being said, for me, that kind of just resonated, not right away, because it was a very, very, very painful process. Because when you don't know, you don't know. And that when you're beginning to add to the things that you did not know, and you're making adjustments, and just in all areas of your life, you're being expanded, if you will. It's painful, because at a certain point, we set into certain habits and ideologies, and it can be difficult to move from those spaces until we are shown something different. And sometimes that being shown something different, it has to be repeated over and over until we have that aha moment, and just say, okay, this is what I finally need to be doing. So here I am, and in the space of working with men. And so I would absolutely uh, not desire to do anything else but work with men. So, yeah.
Awesome. So, a couple of things that you said that really kind of strike me. One, you said underdeveloped, and
Hmm.
that is a component that tends to be consistent
Hmm.
across people who've experienced whatever level of
Right.
trauma.
Right.
People tend to stop developing at
Sure.
whatever age that trauma takes place.
Hmm.
And I don't mean that like physically, but emotionally.
Well,
Like,
yeah, emotionally, mentally, for sure, absolutely.
yes. And so that is very common.
Hmm.
And I want to throw out here a dynamic that maybe a lot of people aren't aware of. But when most of the time this is associated with girls, but it doesn't mean it doesn't happen with boys.
Hmm.
But when boys and girls become teen parents, that is considered a trauma in which they
Absolutely.
usually
Jeez.
stop developing at
Mm.
whatever age now they have this child, because now they're trying to transition into a parent role without having completed their own development. And
Mm. That's
this
interesting.
accounts for, if you've ever seen a woman who's like, now she's in her 40s and the baby she had as a teenager is in the
Right.
20s or something like that, and you see her dressing as if she's 20 years old.
Yes,
You see
yes,
her going
yes.
out and doing things as if
Mm.
she's like that 20-year old. It's
Mm.
because now she's going back and trying to catch up in her
Right.
development.
Mm.
It's a very dysfunctional way of doing that, But what
Absolutely.
you mentioned, it's still necessary. Like
Absolutely.
people still need to be able to go back and complete that development, at
Yes.
whatever stage and age that they are when it happens.
Mm. Yeah, that's powerful, Helen. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's powerful because, especially when you just said you need to go back, and I think that's part of the challenge for so many of us is that we oftentimes we don't want to go back. We don't want to revisit that place because that place was a sign of pain, being uncomfortable, and just we didn't like the space of just being unaware, and that's where I was at when I was younger. Did not like that space of just not knowing. It felt uncomfortable, and and I think for me, just understanding that, and I can in my own mind I said, man, I can now really relate to even teenagers, how they may feel just not being aware of certain things, not having the information, not having the know-how. And now you look at these teenagers who are now men, perhaps with kids or without kids, but nevertheless, when you don't have the guidance, the information, you can only build from that space where you're at, and there eventually will be a gap, and I think it's that gap a lot of times where we get lost at, that misinformation, not because it's the wrong information, it's just because you just don't know. And be it man or woman, we can absolutely be in our 40s, 50s, and just at a space of just operating or at a mentality that is perhaps even a teenager, because as Helen just stated, that's those areas that are just undeveloped, and we must go back, and that's part of what we do, is helping our clients to go back and revisit those areas, even if it's just a little bit at a time. But yeah, that's I love what you said, Helen, being able to go back.
Thank you. I want to kind of build on that a little bit because you
Mhm.
mentioned something and you didn't use the exact same words, but it's how I interpreted it is
Right.
needing a corrective experience because you talked about you becoming a father and
Yeah.
needing that experience of kind of like healing your own self of not having a
Mhm.
father through
Right.
being a father. Like that became your corrective experience for your
Right.
trauma. And corrective experiences, whenever appropriate, I definitely, recommend that for clients that I work with.
Hmm.
Um, Let me explain this dynamic. So, my career in mental health began working in a group home with children who had been severely abused.
Hmm.
And when you're working with that population, like one of the first things, that I was hired within like the first couple of days, the people running the group home said, hey, you need to understand this dynamic. So when it happens, you know what to do.
Right.
And the dynamic is when people have been abused over and over and over again, they have a sense of anxiety that
Hmm.
builds up when they're anticipating the abuse to come,
Mm.
whether it's situational, whether
Right.
it's time based,
Mhm.
whatever. There's this anxiety that keeps building and building. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. And
Mhm.
then when the abuse takes place, there's a release of the anxiety, not
Mm.
because the abuse is soothing, it's
Interesting.
not
Very
soothing,
interesting.
but
Hmm.
they no longer have to worry about when is it coming.
Hmm.
So what tends to
So,
happen, go ahead.
so question. So that means that for a extended period of time, their mind is preoccupied with expecting this.
Yes.
Does that make sense?
Mhm.
What I said, Helen?
Yes. Uh-huh. It does make sense. And sometimes it can be seen in like
Mm.
abusive relationships, like domestic violence
Mm.
situations, where whatever the situation is can be described as the victim antagonized,
Mhm.
the perpetrator, and the victim created the situation. And oftentimes it's
Mm.
because that person is in such a state of anxiety
Right. Right.
waiting for when it's going to happen that they
Mm.
do something to spark whatever that cycle
Ooh,
is
interesting.
so
Yes.
that they
Yes.
can get the relief of, okay, it happened. I don't have to worry
Mm,
about when is it coming. And then the cycle keeps going. So once people
mm,
have been removed from this abusive cycle, what tends to happen is they will antagonize others who aren't their perpetrators to re-incite that abuse because it's the
mm.
only thing they know that relieves the anxiety. And
Wow.
in order for them to heal, they have to have a corrective experience, which is instead of abuse happening when you feel anxious, you need to be soothed and you need to feel comforted and you need to feel safe. And so that's
Mm,
the first thing they taught me going into this group home
mm,
is like, hey, these kids are going to antagonize you. They're going to do everything possible to get under your skin because they're experiencing anxiety. This is their
mm.
way of relieving the anxiety. You cannot feed into it. You
Yeah.
have to be able to be that safe place. You have to be able to soothe, help them self soothe, help them feel safe. And no matter what they do, you still have to be like, hey, I'm not going there. I'm not
Right. Right. Right.
going to re engage that way.
Right.
So
Right. Right.
people need that corrective
Mm,
experience, whether it's
mm.
someone else or giving it to themselves.
Right. Right. Yeah. That's really really powerful, Helen, and I think it's telltale signs of things that take place often in relationships, and in general, not just with kids, but just even with perhaps, as you just mentioned, with the kids, but yet becoming adults and enter into relationships. And obviously, a lot of what you just said is probably, and if I would imagine, undiagnosed, and people don't even realize that they're doing it. And so, if you think about that, man, that's huge because that's probably, I would imagine, probably just the reason why a lot of people are in relationships, because the person is, on edge, dealing with what they've gone through, man or woman, obviously, and they're expecting this trauma to happen. And so can you imagine just being preoccupied with something you're expecting and it doesn't happen, but yet now you have to go out and make it happen in order for you. That's really powerful, in order for you to feel normal, some kind of a place of normalcy, because that's what you've been individual's been accustomed to. So that's very very interesting. And so for the other person on the other side of that, and I think for me, as a man, Helen, I think that it was important for me to uh, it was important for me to get through the other side of that, because even with I was sharing with you, shared earlier, as far as with the trauma that originally came from with my mother. Not that she was a bad person, it was more so that my expectations, this is what a mom should do, this is what we should expect. And only until I became a parent myself, I had to put away all those childish things, seriously, because I found that a lot of it just was me. And but as a result now, I could share with you that uh, it was it carried over into relationships, in my relationships where uh, just felt like I just couldn't trust. I had to go out and do it on my own, and just feeling like I didn't have anyone in my corner. And because for me with my mother, it was a trust issue, something where I felt that she just was never on time for anything, and that just really did something to me. But so I had to get to the other side of that, and give her the benefit of doubt, because it could be for a number amount of reasons why, but also know that she could have been dealing with her own stuff as well. And so that's what I would have to later on, again, as we're talking about the trauma and eventually getting to the other side of it. So that for me, that's how I got to the other side of it, is being able to put it in the right perspective, and absolutely with the help of God Almighty. That was, my faith, obviously, as a Christian, getting to the other side of that. So that was very instrumental for me.
Okay. Um, I wrote down a couple of notes, but so I think there's like a number of things that you said that I can definitely go in different directions with. Um, I guess I'm going to choose one, the right perspective, because you talked about having the right perspective.
Mhm.
I think that's kind of a tricky thing
Yeah.
because I'm all for allowing people to have their emotional experiences and
Mhm.
saying, you know what, it is 100% okay for you to feel however you feel. But I'm never a person that condones bad behavior. Like, but I completely understand part of what you're saying too is not that your mom engaged in certain, behaviors out of spite, out of
Right.
manipulation, or,
Mhm.
whatever. It's what she knew. For whatever
Right.
reason, it's what she knew. And I totally get that. And even with my mother, being a paranoid schizophrenic, I have to imagine there is just a disconnect.
Right. Right. Absolutely. Absolutely.
There really wasn't an awareness, that was there.
As my mom would say, oftentimes, that let me help you. So let me imagine that there's that you're not getting something.
Right, right, definitely that. But coming back to like the right perspective, because I know there are people out there who are dealing with serious traumas,
Sure.
sexual abuse, physical abuse,
Mhm.
lots of different things that have happened. And I don't want them to be in a place of thinking that I myself or you are saying, just change your perspective. That is not where I'm coming from at all. Um, and I think it's more so a matter of it touches on forgiveness, you know,
Sure.
how I'm interpreting what you said, and having the right perspective. I think that's more so about forgiveness and being able to say, you know what, this person did what they did because of what they knew and who they were at that particular time.
Absolutely.
And just being able to say that person wasn't capable of being the mom, that you wanted.
Right.
My mother wasn't capable of being the mom that I wanted. Other people out there weren't capable of fulfilling whatever roles because of whatever
Right.
else they had going on, and
Mm.
not taking it personally in terms of, that you yourself did something to
Right.
deserve it or to cause it or to shape it, or whatever it
Right.
was. So I think the right perspective, I'm looking at it as like, okay, it's appropriate wording, but also it's very tricky in terms of how people may interpret it.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah, I completely understand where you're coming from. So if I could just really just touch bases on that right perspective, what I'm meaning, and as just Helen said so nicely, is that it is not just a matter of just saying, oh, just having the right perspective. This is just easy. That's not what I mean. Having the right perspective in my situation meant that it happened over time. It happened over time, and as Helen stated, also it is a matter of forgiveness. And so that was absolutely my viewing into this matter, or what I had gone through, is really just letting my mom off the hook, because there are a lot of things that I did not know when I became a parent. And you realize that, man, this parenting is difficult. It's not easy. And sure, there are a lot of manuals on it, and things of that nature now we do, but perhaps at the time that she was, up and coming, and she was a teenage mom, and just as Helen stated, is that there are a lot of things that she did not know. And so I think as children, as a child I was at a time, uh, we place our parents on the hook for certain things and thinking they know. And being a teenage mom, and as Helen stated earlier, there was that place where it was just the development was arrested at that point. And at some point she would have to go back to that place and make changes or do the healing and things of that nature. But I was responsible for letting her off the hook, because I can't charge her for something that she did not know or she was unaware of. Or, and again, whether you're an adult person listening to this, matter of fact, I was just speaking with a member of my church not too long ago about how she was dealing with her mother, and just counting it as they did not know. And that's just somehow how it is sometimes. And again, as Helen mentioned, it's just, it was the forgiveness piece of it as well, and by the grace of God as well, because I know sometimes that we, at least from what I experienced, and as I was talking with the young lady at my church, is that uh, sometimes we can be so caught up in what we're wanting to charge someone with, that we don't realize that it was our responsibility to let them go, and so that we can find ourselves, or at least uh, let ourselves off the hook. And so we're not, because if you think about it, we can find ourselves dealing with that arrested development as well, and having ourselves on the hook for something that we are captivated by, essentially, because in most cases the message or the situation, it may not be so loud in our heads, but it's still going on in the background, like an operating system that's taking place. And so we present ourselves one way, but yet this operating system of the trauma, whatever it might be, is playing in the background. But yet at times it's louder than other times. But that was the case for me. But like I said, getting to the other side of that was a challenge, and it was having to put it in the right perspective, and placing it in the right perspective absolutely took time. It was a healing process for sure. It did not happen overnight, but putting in the right perspective is really looking at different perspectives that come up over a period of
Right.
time, and you're having to facilitate those perspectives and at least file them properly. Well, no, maybe she wasn't going through this. I mean, really, this is a dialogue that was going through my head, and I would imagine this is the dialogue going through many people are going through the head, and as they're trying to make sense of it. And that was the case for me, trying to make sense of it. Again, putting it in the right perspective, where I could let her off the hook, let myself off the hook, and here we are with forgiveness, as Helen stated.
Right, right. So something else within what you're talking about, because you said she didn't know. And I've definitely sat with clients who were just like, they did know. They did know that,
Hmm.
sexually abusing a child was wrong. They did know that,
Absolutely.
you know, punching somebody in the face was wrong. They did know.
Right.
So I, I agree. You don't have to be that old to
Right.
understand
Right.
right
Right.
from wrong. However, and again, we're coming back into that forgiveness piece because we're talking
Mhm.
about trauma and then getting to the other side of it. And
Mhm.
let me be very, very clear. No one gets on the other side of trauma without forgiveness.
Absolutely. Come
So
on now.
coming back to this is
Come on. That's the
yes,
facts.
yes, that person knew it was wrong, but what that person didn't know is how to be different.
Mm, that's good, Helen. Real good.
Whatever that person had experienced growing up, and most of the time, an abuser was once a victim, you
Absolutely.
know? So that's what that person learned. And if that person was never exposed to a corrective
Mm,
experience, then that person never had an opportunity to heal what was
absolutely.
broken, hurt, missing,
Mm,
underdeveloped, whatever it was. They never had a chance to heal it. And they found themselves in a position of not knowing anything else to do.
mm. Yes, yes, yes.
So when it comes to that, again, I am never one to excuse bad behavior. Bad behavior is bad behavior. That's it. But when it comes to you and your journey, you have to heal through forgiveness. And that forgiveness is
Sure,
being able to understand, but that person didn't know what
sure.
else to do.
Absolutely,
That
Helen.
So, I mean, I just want to put that out there, and
Mm,
so that people can get to a place of being able to just release it.
yeah.
Because as long as you're holding on to it, now you're putting yourself in a place where you're traumatizing yourself.
Mm,
Because
yes.
every time something happens, you're taking yourself back to those
Mm,
moments and those experiences and those memories and whatever
mm,
else there is. And like now you are responsible for your trauma because now you are the one who's reiterating it.
yeah. Absolutely. Yeah, that's very, very powerful, Helen, because I think ultimately when the individual is dealing with the trauma, they end up traumatizing their partner, their spouse, their kids. They're taking their kids through something, and again, it may not be necessary to the degree or the level which the trauma was done to a particular person, but to know that you are not fully available or you cannot be available or that you're preoccupied in your mind, uh, I think I think that's a level of abuse, because if you are not present in the moment, I think I think so many of us miss out on opportunities with our children. We miss on opportunities within networking with people, or bringing the right partner in our life, or a spouse, or whatever the case might be. We miss out on so many opportunities, and because we can find ourselves preoccupied, as Helen has been speaking of earlier, preoccupied with this trauma that we've been dealing with, expecting a result at any moment now. It can come any moment. Why hasn't he done this, or why hasn't she done this? Because this is what the individuals is used to or accustomed to. And I think for me, Helen, the remedy for trauma, or what I dealt with in my trauma, the remedy was love. The remedy was love, and the remedy was healing that I could, even for the relationships that were working for a time and did not work out. Those also represented the people that God placed in my life to touch those triggers, to pull on those triggers and say, hey, ouch, and I would say, ouch, ouch, and get upset and go somewhere in a huddle and try to figure it out myself. And oftentimes that's what we do as men, and that's what women do. It's what people do. And we like to remove ourselves from the situation, but it comes a time where, hey, love is here, love is in the air, and it absolutely can be the catalyst for solving the issue that you might be dealing with. And as I said earlier, for me, it was my relationship with Christ, and that was the remedy. And I'll even say, pun intended, it was a nail in the coffin, and I could absolutely put those matters to rest, and speak to these different things confidently now without shrinking back from them.
Right, right. So I know we're coming to the end, but a couple of things. So I know a while back you had mentioned trust issues, and then you just brought up love. So let me try to address both of them really quick. So one is I can't even count the number of times people say, oh, I have trust issues. I have trust issues. And some people have gotten upset with me because my response to them saying I have trust issues is everybody has trust issues. Why?
Right.
Because trust is a catch 22.
Sure.
You
Absolutely.
don't know if you can trust someone until you trust them. Like you
Right.
have to extend that opportunity for a person to prove themselves
Hmm.
before you can say they're trustworthy or they're not trustworthy.
Hmm.
And if you've experienced something in which someone has betrayed your trust, especially a close personal person, a family member, someone who's supposed to be safe,
Hmm.
and that person who was pre-labeled as safe because of their role, their position in community or whatever it was, you let your guard down
Mm.
because you assumed that this person was going to be
Right.
trustworthy. And then that person betrayed your trust by doing whatever it is that they did. And so then people say, oh, well, now I have trust issues because this person betrayed my trust. And now I can't trust anyone. And I
Right.
have to walk them backwards a little bit and say,
I'm sure they're hot with you, Helen, at that time.
trust me. There have been clients who've been very honest with me and said, after you said that, I really wanted to leave and never come back.
Yes, yes, yes.
Because
Mm,
I've spent years tiptoeing around people's feelings in terms of, ooh, I
yes.
can't say that in therapy. Ooh, I can't do
Mhm.
that. I can't. And ultimately what I've learned is, but I wasn't helping them by
Mm,
not being truthful
right.
and honest and saying, but
Mm,
this is what it is. I'm not helping you by buying into the illusion you've
mm,
created for yourself to stay in your dysfunction.
right.
I have to be that light that's shining over here and saying,
Mm,
but that don't look right.
right, right.
So I realize that I step on people's toes, and I try to preface it, and I try to say, hey, look, I'm about to say something that might hurt your feelings.
Right, right.
But I'm saying this because if you are someone who has been telling yourself and telling others, I have trust issues, I have trust issues, I have trust issues, that is an excuse for you to stay in the exact same spot
Mm,
that you're in, for you to keep feeding your own trauma. And if you truly want to have the healing and to get on the other side of this, you have to accept trust is a catch 22. And every time
mm,
you extend it, you are taking a risk of being hurt. And there is nothing in this world that is going to change that dynamic. You
right.
have to learn how to help yourself through it, self soothe. And that's where I connected to the love part,
Mm,
because love absolutely is a powerful, powerful thing. But we have distorted the true nature of love to such an extent that people believe love is painful, and
mm.
that there's a bad side
That's
of
good.
love. No, there's not.
That's good. Yeah, that's good, Helen. That's really good.
So I
Mm,
want people to understand, like,
mm,
if something is hurting you, then it's stepped outside of love. What it is, I
mm.
don't know.
Yeah,
But it has truly stepped outside of love. And your path to healing, and I want to empower people. Your path to healing is through love, but it doesn't mean that love has to come from someone else. It
yes.
absolutely can come from you to you.
Absolutely.
And so,
Absolutely.
and that's how I view your experience, Curtis, where you're talking about that's what you found in your relationship with Christ. Because I'm
Absolutely.
sure as you built that relationship, part of it was you learning how to love you and forgive you, and to show yourself all those aspects of love that
Absolutely.
you were receiving from that relationship with Christ.
Absolutely, Helen. You hit the nail right on the head. You smacked the heck out of that nail. But yeah, no, it's absolutely, Helen, that is perfectly said. Yeah, I think that we have to see love as something, not something so much as something that someone else is giving to us, but you have to first give it to yourself. And you have to first see that there is, uh, for me, my faith, trying to convert anyone here, but my faith was the container that held all of this for me. And to this day, I rely heavily on my faith, so much so that I'm able to share this same love, the same message with others. That, as Helen said so nicely, love is the only way out for our healing. And it's not up to someone else to that we're placing that expectation on. Oh, they didn't love me. She didn't love me. He didn't love me. No, it's our responsibility to look at the glass half full rather than half empty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And just to throw this out really, really quick, self self love. I know because people ask me all the time, well, what is self love? What does that look like? The first part is you never use your words against you. That means you
Mm,
are not calling yourself dumb, stupid,
right.
a loser or anything else like that. And the second part of it is you are going to talk to yourself with kindness, compassion, patience, and gratitude. That is
Yes.
how you practice self love, and that is how you get yourself to the other side of healing with trauma. So,
Absolutely.
that is all I have to say.
That's that's it right there. Nice ending. Nice close.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for tuning in to another episode of the Jabez Experience, and we definitely hope that you come back next time.
All right. We'll talk with you later. Ciao for now. Bye bye.